Morales spent years making Donald Trump's bed and performing other duties at his New Jersey club, even though she was undocumented.
What if I told you that the person who made Donald Trump's bed every morning for years knew secrets that could change everything? What if that person was living in the shadows, watching and listening, while being told she wasn't supposed to exist? Today, we're going to tell you the incredible true story of Victorina Morales, a brave woman who finally decided to speak up after years of silence. Her story will shock you, inspire you, and make you see power in a completely different way. Picture this. It's a beautiful morning at one of the most expensive golf clubs in New Jersey. The grass is perfectly green, the buildings shine like diamonds, and everything looks like a fairy tale. Rich people come here to play golf, eat fancy food, and feel important. But behind all this beauty, there's a secret world that most people never see. In this hidden world, there are people who work incredibly hard to make everything look perfect. They clean every room, wash every dish, and make sure not even a single piece of dust can be found anywhere. Among these invisible workers was a woman named Victorina Morales. She was 52 years old when she finally decided to tell her story, but her journey at Trump's golf club began much earlier. Victorina wasn't just any regular cleaner at this fancy place. She had a very special job that most people would never imagine. Every single day, she was responsible for taking care of Donald Trump's personal bedroom and private spaces. Think about that for a moment. While millions of Americans were watching Trump on TV, arguing about him at dinner tables, and voting for or against him, Victorina was the person who made his bed, cleaned his bathroom, and prepared his clothes. But here's what makes this story so amazing and so troubling at the same time. Victorina was what people call undocumented. This means she didn't have the legal papers that allowed her to work in America. And Donald Trump, the man whose bed she made every morning, was the same person who spent years telling the whole country that undocumented people were dangerous and needed to be sent away. Can you imagine how that must have felt? Every day, Victorina would turn on the news and hear the man she worked for saying terrible things about people just like her. He would give speeches about building walls to keep people like her out of the country. He would call undocumented workers criminals and threats. But at the same time, he was depending on her to make his life comfortable and perfect. When Victorina first started working at the Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster, New Jersey in 2013, she probably never imagined she would become part of such an important story. She was just trying to make a living and support her family. Like millions of other people, she came to America looking for a better life and a chance to work hard for her dreams. The job seemed simple enough at first. Clean rooms, make beds, do laundry. But Victorina quickly learned that working for Donald Trump was nothing like a normal job. Everything had to be absolutely perfect. And I mean everything. The way his shirts were folded, how his toothpaste was arranged on the counter, even the temperature of his room had to be exactly right. But here's what's really shocking about this story. Even though Victorina didn't have the legal papers to work in America, the people who hired her knew this from the very beginning. They didn't just accidentally hire her without checking. According to Victorina, her supervisors actually helped her get fake documents so she could stay on the job. They gave her fake Social Security numbers and fake green cards. This wasn't a mistake or an oversight. It was planned. Think about how crazy the situation was. The Trump Organization, owned by a man who was constantly talking about following the law and getting rid of undocumented workers, was actively helping undocumented workers stay employed. They were breaking the same laws that Trump was telling everyone else to follow. But the strangest part wasn't just that Victorina worked there illegally. It was how she was treated while she worked there. Victorina was told that she must never, ever speak when Donald Trump was around. She couldn't look at him. She couldn't even be in the same room as him. If she saw him coming, she had to quickly leave and hide until he was gone. Imagine having to disappear like a ghost every time your boss showed up. Imagine being so invisible that you weren't allowed to exist in the same space as the person you were working for. This wasn't just about being polite or respectful. This was about making sure that Trump never had to be reminded that his perfect, luxurious world was built on the hard work of people he publicly said shouldn't even be in the country. Victorina described her daily routine, and it's both fascinating and heartbreaking. Every morning, she would arrive at the club early, before Trump woke up. She would quietly enter his private areas and begin making everything perfect. His bed had to be made in a very specific way. His clothes had to be steamed and arranged exactly how he liked them. His bathroom had to be spotless, with every single item placed in the right position. If she made even the tiniest mistake, there would be serious consequences. A towel folded the wrong way, a mirror with a small smudge, or a piece of furniture moved slightly out of place could result in angry phone calls, harsh criticism, and threats of being fired. The pressure was enormous because Victorina knew that unlike other employees, she couldn't just find another job if she was fired. Being undocumented meant that losing this job could mean losing everything. The fear was constant and crushing. Every single day, Victorina lived with the knowledge that she could be discovered, reported, and deported at any moment. She had to be perfect at her job, while also being invisible as a person. She had to care deeply about her work, while pretending she didn't exist. It's hard to imagine how exhausting and scary that must have been. But Victorina wasn't the only one living this double life at Trump's golf club. There were other workers, many of them also undocumented, who were going through the same thing. They all knew each other's secrets, but they couldn't talk about them because talking could get them all in trouble. They worked long hours, often more than 60 hours per week, for very little money and no benefits. Donald Trump himself was often moody and unpredictable. According to Victorina, small things could make him very angry. If his coffee wasn't hot enough, if something was moved from where he expected it to be, or if anything wasn't exactly perfect, he could explode with frustration. This made the job even more stressful because workers never knew what might set him off. Sometimes, Trump would give Victorina small tips, maybe $50 or $100, especially if he was happy with her work. But these weren't regular bonuses or fair payment for all her hard work. They were more like rewards for good behavior, reminders that if she kept being quiet and invisible, she might get a little extra money. But if she stepped out of line or made him unhappy, that money would disappear, and so might she. Even Melania Trump played a role in this system, though in a quieter way. Victorina described her as someone who didn't say much, but who noticed everything. Melania had very high standards for how the house should look, and she would remember if something wasn't quite right. Her silence was just as powerful as Donald's anger because it created a different kind of pressure to be perfect. For years, Victorina lived in this strange, stressful world. She was essential to making Trump's life comfortable, but she was never allowed to feel secure or valued. She knew intimate details about how one of the most powerful men in America lived his private life, but she couldn't tell anyone because her survival depended on staying quiet. As time went on and Trump became president, the contradiction became even harder to bear. Victorina would watch the news and see the man whose bed she made every morning giving speeches about how undocumented people were ruining America. She would hear him talk about building walls and deporting people just like her. Meanwhile, she was still showing up to work every day, still making his life perfect, still being invisible. The breaking point came when Victorina realized she couldn't live with this lie anymore. She had spent years hoping that maybe Trump would change. Maybe he would find a way to help people like her instead of hurting them. But as his rhetoric got harsher and his policies got tougher on immigrants, she understood that he wasn't going to change. If anything, he was getting worse. Victorina made an incredibly brave decision. She decided to tell her story to the New York Times, one of the biggest newspapers in America. This wasn't an easy choice. She knew that speaking out could ruin her life. She could be deported. She could be punished. Her family could be hurt. But she felt that staying silent would be even worse than facing those risks. When Victorina finally spoke up, she didn't do it for money or fame. In fact, she turned down offers to sell her story or make it into a business opportunity. She did it because she believed people deserved to know the truth. She wanted Americans to understand that the man who was telling them to fear undocumented immigrants was actually depending on undocumented immigrants to run his businesses. Her story was explosive. It revealed that the Trump organization had been hiring undocumented workers for years while Trump was campaigning and governing on promises to crack down on exactly those kinds of workers. It showed that supervisors had actively helped workers get fake documents. It proved that the company knew exactly who they were hiring and chose to look the other way because it benefited them. When the story became public, the Trump organization immediately tried to distance itself from the scandal. They claimed they had no idea that workers like Victorina were undocumented. They said they had fired all undocumented workers as soon as they found out about them. But for Victorina and others who had lived through the system, these explanations felt like lies. Victorina insisted that management had always known who they were. She said the system was designed to work exactly the way it did, with powerful people getting the benefits and workers like her taking all the risks. The company got cheap, reliable labor from people who couldn't complain or ask for better treatment. And if those workers ever became a problem, they could be easily removed and replaced. What makes Victorina's story so important isn't just what it reveals about Donald Trump or his businesses. It's what it shows us about how power works in America. There are millions of people like Victorina working invisible jobs that keep our economy running. They clean our offices, cook our food, take care of our children, and maintain our homes. Many of them are undocumented, and many of them live in constant fear. These workers are often called essential, especially after the COVID pandemic showed us how much we depend on them. But they're rarely treated as essential. They work long hours for low pay. They have no job security. They can't complain when they're treated badly because they're afraid of being reported or fired. And they're constantly told by politicians and media that they don't belong here, even as those same politicians and media companies benefit from their work. Victorina's courage in speaking out gave a voice to all these invisible workers. She showed that they're not just statistics or political talking points. They're real people with families, dreams, and stories. They deserve dignity and respect, not fear and exploitation. Her story also forced Americans to confront an uncomfortable truth about immigration. The reality is much more complicated than the simple stories politicians tell us. Many businesses, including some owned by people who publicly oppose undocumented immigration, actually depend on undocumented workers. These businesses benefit from a system that keeps workers scared and powerless while allowing employers to claim ignorance if they get caught. After Victorina's story became public, it contributed to investigations into Trump's businesses and sparked broader conversations about immigration reform and workers' rights. Her bravery inspired other workers to come forward with their own stories. She became a symbol of resistance against exploitation and hypocrisy. But perhaps most importantly, Victorina's story reminds us that behind every political issue are real human beings. Immigration isn't just about laws and borders and economics. It's about people like Victorina who came to America seeking better lives and ended up trapped in systems that use them while denying their humanity. Today, Victorina continues to speak out about workers' rights and immigration reform. She has become an advocate for other people in similar situations. Her decision to break her silence changed not just her own life, but contributed to important conversations about fairness, justice, and how we treat the most vulnerable people in our society. The woman who once had to hide in the shadows while making Donald Trump's bed is now standing in the light, telling her truth and demanding that others be seen too. She transformed from being invisible to being unforgettable. Her story proves that even the most powerless people can find the strength to challenge the most powerful, and that sometimes the most important truths come from the most unexpected places. Victorina Morales shows us that courage doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes courage looks like a quiet woman who spent years being invisible finally deciding to be seen. Sometimes courage looks like risking everything you have to tell a truth that needs to be told. And sometimes courage looks like refusing to stay silent when staying silent would be easier, but staying silent would also be wrong. Her story will continue to inspire people for years to come, reminding us all that everyone deserves dignity, everyone deserves to be seen, and everyone has the power to make a difference, no matter how small or invisible they might feel. If this story moved you, if it opened your eyes to something new, or if it made you think differently about immigration, workers' rights, or the power of speaking truth, then please hit that like button right now. Share this video with your friends and family, because stories like Victorina's need to be heard by as many people as possible. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that will challenge what you think you know about the world. Your support helps us continue bringing you these important stories that mainstream media often overlooks. Together, we can make sure that voices like Victorina's are never silenced again.